Hello, 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 world. This is Shruti Pandey. And if you're seeing familiar or similar faces, not just me, I'm talking about, but Parasar Sir, who was one of our guests in one of the episodes earlier this year, we are not just recording a podcast today or something like that, but it's very special because it's going to be a discussion around a topic which is so upbeat these days, or which is so over the topic these days, or so under the topic these days, which is testing and AI, artificial intelligence. So I think we both have been waiting to get on a call and put our thoughts on this and talk about it. So treat this as not just a podcast episode or a debate or a round table or whatever, but mostly you can think of it as a round table but between two people. But this is going to be an open-ended conversation about what views each of us has around testing and AI. And feel free to comment when the podcast is out. I'll probably release it today. I can't keep good things to myself. So thank you so much, Parasar sir, for having this idea of doing something like this and having a conversation like this with me and record it over a Saturday evening slash morning. So thank you so much.
So thank you, Shruti, to have me on this podcast. And it's always a pleasure to be back in your podcast. Last time we did, it was a very open conversation, and I love that. I was waiting for this conversation, and one thing you mentioned is very true. It's a very open-ended conversation. It's not something that's scripted. This is something like, we want to kind of like, flow our mind about one of the most important topic that is hitting not only testing the whole world, right? It's a topic that is so much relevant for our day-to-day life to even what we are doing in testing. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. Yes.
So, like I said, this is not an interview thing to all of you, and that's true in every bit of sense. I have categorized this conversation into three topics, and those three topics are as per Sir's suggestion. The first one is awareness, second one is learning, and third one is adoption, or how your entire team can use something like this. So, sir, would you like to start with awareness? So first you go, then I.
Absolutely. I would love to kind of take that word, sir, from like, from there, like, because I haven't received that title yet. So, like, I don't think I'm that learned enough to be the sir. Just to kind of like, back up a bit, to talk about like, on the last time when we talked and now where we are, like, I'm in the industry talking in multiple forums, like, and also entrepreneur at this point, like, SaaS entrepreneur, the founder CEO of Digi4. A lot of people knows me at like the founder CEO of Digi4. In the journey of Digi4, we have progressed a lot, right? Okay, now we like in the global clients, and there are a lot of kind of like, large segment clients. And these conversations, like, come up several times, like, what are you doing with AI? So when we actually like, if we go back, uh, maybe like, a year or so, um, we were thinking, how do we kind of start this journey of AI? Okay. The only thing that was kind of like, pushing us to get there was not getting into the hype. It's not about that, okay, everybody is doing AI, so we have to get into the AI. That was not what was pushing us. What was pushing us to think about the AI and think about how do we bring AI into Digi4 was mostly thinking about like, what is the need of the hour? And we saw that, testing has a need, it's a very urgent need of it. Why? The question is, why do we have this? Um, when you see testing as an operation in the like, in the business world, it is to kind of ensure there is quality of in the process on the quality on the development thing that has been done. Now, when the development has actually adopted AI significantly, we looked at some of the numbers, 1.3 million, like, Copilot users. Copilot is heavily used across in the industry in several places. 30% like quarter to quarter growth in the number of users who are actually adopting like Copilot and other AI-based development tools, right? Okay, that brings us tremendous amount of acceleration on the dev side. In today's world, if you go to a lot of these companies, they will start saying the success story of that AI. They actually benchmark it. Some of them have numbers which are like, 5 to 9 x acceleration in the development side. Now, if you are having that huge acceleration in development, how do you keep it up with the testing? End of the day, you think about it, software is a product which will hit the common people. Okay. It's not about development testing. It is that common people who are going to be using it. You and me, like, we put up the head of the common user, like daily user, we are going to use the app. Think about a app which is like, your, like any of this app which uses AI. Now, if that AI is not built in a way or the function is supported by AI and it is not tested well, if the code is not tested well, like not even AI, like even the code that the developer is pushing, which has some level of AI assistance to create it, if that is not tested well, common people will have the challenge. So our day-to-day life will be impacted. And that's the reason we need to think about like, how do we bring AI into testing to keep up with the development pace and the whole software lifecycle pace that has come into the picture. So we have to think about it. So I have this hashtag called AI in QE. I always write in that, and quality matters at the hashtag. So that's the reason I thought it's very relevant for us to think about, talk about, and see how we bring about the adoption.
So I was actually thinking of, having counter questions to this one, but I am, trying to control myself because I don't want to make this that interviewee kind of a session. But really interesting points. I appreciate your view. And like I said before, this is not a debate. Sir has his own style of presenting things and his own experiences, what he has seen and what he's talking about. Coming to what I feel with respect to, awareness and AI and testing is, um, it's so funny that when you get into testing, for most testers in India, let's make the circle a little smaller, not global, just taking some example, half of the testers are, put into testing. So testing was never their first love. And when it comes to automation, the first thought is, okay, once we get into automation, it would help us in, better switch, better hike and everything. But interestingly, when I started in testing and I got into automation, everything happened very early for me. It was back in 2011, but all that transition happened really early. I used to see and sense and hear a lot of, um what do you call insecurity from developers. They would actually tell me on my face that, oh, you're a tester and you're going to automate it, so my job is going to go. And my, in the sense, the developer's job is going to go. And I used to question them back saying, how is your job going when I'm going to automate the testing part? Like, my job should go, right? So I think this entire debate and question and existence of testing as a skill, testing as a talent, testing as an industry, I think it has always been a question mark for so many people, including testers themselves. That's a big problem. And even automation used to be, looked at like a villain from everybody's aspect. Like, okay, it will take up testing's job, it will take up developers' job, this, that. But I think AI is a similar demon that we are facing. I'm not very pro AI or like anti AI kind of a person, but I see to it from a third or eagle view point of view, thinking that it's very similar to anything new that comes into industry. And ironically, artificial intelligence is not something new. If you, I, and everybody listening, if you are engineer by chance, as per your degree and profession, you would know that there's a person called as Alan Turing. Most of us would know about him. He was writing and talking about this since 1950s. So AI is something that has already been in the market. I genuinely feel the awareness needs to come right now, because we need to understand what Frankenstein we are creating. For a very simple reason, if we look at it like that, when I say Frankenstein, you don't have to be scared about it, but just saying it out loud that we need to understand what we are creating. Like sir also mentioned that developers are already using it. So when as a tester my job is to test something which is created by AI, suppose I need to understand what's going on inside, like any other product, like any other tool. Like sometime back you were talking about web3, so everything is new until it's not. So AI is, I think, again something like that. And just ending my long story on a short note, hopefully with an example again, which is, if you look at Google 20 years back, anyone would have thought of it as AI only, right? Google search is not something like a miracle or something. We all trained it by feeding data into it, by searching into it. So even Google is an AI. So we need to understand, adapt, and keep it in a way which is good for everybody, for humanity, if I were to say. So yeah, that's my 2 cents about awareness and AI.
I think what you finished up with, that's a very key point. It need to be something that is good for humanity, right? All the technology is something that should like help us to enhance and improve that stuff. Let me unpack some of the points that you mentioned, right? You mentioned about the job security thing, right? Let me start there because a lot of these discussions, which I do these days in the industry, this question comes up several times. Okay, and I look at it this perspective. Okay, and I'll give an example here. So when automation was coming, people were kind of scared that they will lose the job. They will lose the job and they will not be relevant for the next phase, right?
Right.
But the industry survived. And I saw the best way it survived is when people were given that kind of the direction that, hey, you have to learn automation as well. Okay. Then it comes to the fact of like, this is a part of your life.
Right.
Okay. If you're making a change and if you make it a part of your life, you don't think as an extrovert. This is something slowly get into that. And the companies who said like, there are companies who said like, you have to learn it and we will assist you to learn it. That helps the process to happen. This is a transition. This is not an elimination process. When the companies go back and said they, if you're a manual tester or you're doing it in a not automated way and we won't need you, that is not going to help. But if you help that transition to happen, you make a powerful workforce. If you do elimination process, you're not going to make a powerful workforce because the people who are doing the things also have a lot of domain knowledge, a lot of history they'll come with, right? You can't lose that history. So the transition is the path. Now, the other piece that you mentioned, like, AI was there long time back. So what is the difference? And this is very relevant for the previous part I talked about, the transition, that thing. See, AI was there, but the whole world of GenAI is very different. Okay, how I see it is, and we do a lot of AI implementation these days, right? We work with a lot of these things. Okay, we work with conventional AI model, we work with deterministic model, we work with like, the Gen AI model. Think about it this way, that if you're given AI, just AI, it's more about like, you're given a Java tool, just a Java. But when you are given something like Gen AI, it's a package solution. Which one would you prefer? A package solution,
Right.
right? So now Gen AI has made that cycle of using a technology and putting into a business case much easier. You really don't need to kind of like do a lot of things. You can just go to the GenAI, it's a package solution and you can implement fast. So that is the beauty of it. Okay, now what it opens up for adoption is that now you don't need to be a data scientist to kind of like use AI. It became a household tool now. You can go and kind of like, let's say you want to build a resume, right? You can go to a Gen AI model and just kind of ask, give your data put, and then you can use it. You don't need to be a data scientist to do it. It transitioned the technology as a business tool.
Right.
Now, how it goes back to the last question is like, that this is where the transition process get accelerated. You don't need to now go through the whole data scientist thing to become expert in AI or use AI. That's where I would say, like, the help and awareness is very important. A lot of people think about, hey, what has changed? Like, AI has been there, but how this world is different, how is it going to impact, right? The only way you will be able to figure it out when you explore yourself, right? Okay, that's, I always think that it's exploration, adaptation, and that's where it's going to be like, help you to bring it up.
This conversation is, on fire already, and it's going on high, high, high. And I think it's actually at that point where I feel like saying that let's switch to the second topic, which is learning, because I think it's already there and you need to break that ice. What's in it for the learning part? What do you think? I really
I
want
think
to hear about right now.
that's a very important question at this point, because we talked about awareness. When you
Exactly.
think of awareness, what is the next step? It's a learning, right? Um, I see this is something that the learning thing has to be taken up by different people in the like in the ecosystem. That is the product vendors who are actually building the tool, their whole team has to learn. Okay, so I run an organization, so there are different parts of my organization. My
Right.
engineering has to learn. It's not only enough my engineering learns, my sales has to know what it is doing, my marketing has to know what it is, right? Okay, so everybody in the organization need to be tuned in some way, the either that how to put AI in context of what they are doing. That's a product organization. Then the people who are going to be using AI, like the business organization, like the banks or like the retail companies and stuff. So their decision makers also need to know how the AI work, right? Okay, you cannot be uh, like just relying on people who are giving you suggestions. You need to know, because this is a fundamental change. This is a pivotal change. What could have been done in like in a month or so can be done in a minutes, and without spending any development effort. So how can you do that? How can it impacts you, right? So you have to know as decision makers, and from there, like and the decision makers need to facilitate the fun that learning for each individual in the organization. There should be a basic fundamental course of foundation of AI, right? Okay, and that's where when you know that foundation of AI, you will be like more talking relevant to in those terms. You know what to use, what to use, what's the good, bad, and ugly of these models and things are.
Right. So, how I look at it is okay, I'm already laughing. I hope this is resonating with somebody when I am saying my part of answers to somebody, because his are making a lot of sense. I hope mine are making too. How I look at how to learn AI, or with respect to testing or incorporating it. Again, as I mentioned before, I'm not a pro AI or an anti AI person. So I look it from the middle line. And again, let's take a little step back and go on the point where we start learning automation as testers. I think we, at least from my school or my generation of testers, our companies used to train us on QTP, UFT, which are very bulky tools, or which used to be very bulky tools, and that's how we progressed. But the irony or the beauty, whatever you may choose for yourself, is you are only trained on these tools. But whenever you move into automation, the first ask from your company and the client is to use something that is open source. So the first choice would go as, Selenium or something like that. Like it has to be open source, or if not Selenium, use Java and create something. Forget even JavaScript. It used to be like, can you use Java and leverage something? So it was always about finding how do I understand the XPath, the locators of the system, and etc. And a very simple tool which looked like a game to me was, the initial version of Selenium which was created, which had all that record and playback system. Like you just go, you click, it starts recording. And I genuinely feel that it's also a beautiful AI which was created by great engineers, because it's such a innovative and simple way to get a non-automation person see how they can transition into getting into automation. Before there was anything like, low code, no code. Then there came another generation, and there was, products and tools and platforms and markets where we were seeing cross browser testing. Even before cross browser testing, it was called as responsive web testing, because we were suddenly testing on all sizes of screens and tablets and phones, etc., etc. So I think there has been an evolution with technology in testing as well. And if not anybody else, but I think testers have always been so adjusting in nature and so adaptive and so flexible, because if we don't do that, how do we survive to the changing pace? I'm sorry, I think this is my bias here, but more than developers, testers are always so much more agile in nature to learn something new. So we try Selenium record and playback. We try something which would help us in, I remember using plugins and whatnot and of Selenium to try something cross browser testing or responsive web testing till a next set came where there were, web farms given to us where we are testing on different things. And I'm making it unnecessarily large now, now the answer. So again, I think when we talk about low code, no code, there is a flavor of AI, there is a flavor of machine learning, there is a flavor of, if not NLP, there is something going on behind. And there also came a point, like sir was mentioning a little while earlier, that every team needs to understand what AI is when working on a product. So suddenly that started showing in the marketing and everything community of testing companies and teams as well, where they started saying, okay, this is AI based tool or plugin or platform, or now we even have low code, no code. So I think there was hesitancy before to use even something like a low code, no code, but we see the beauty of it, that okay, it helps people learn quickly and everything like that. And I think even that is an example of AI, right? Because, or Gen AI rather, because somebody has hard coded a set of things for you. Think of it also like as a IntelliJ IDE, right? Sometimes it gives you the prompts, right? If you have the settings on, it will suggest to you, okay, you're trying to create a constructor, okay, you're trying to create a class. So something as intuitive as that. But okay, now I'll stop into this answer. But yeah, that's how I feel about learning. It's a non-stop process, and things would come, things would go, languages would come, languages would go. I think similar case is with AI.
Absolutely. I think it is a continuous process, right? Because AI on one side is also evolving. Um, I mean, I don't think the Gen AI community will say that we have evolved that much, right? To get that, okay, we're, you see so many, like, on that particular model, like, whatever model you are using, you see so many versions coming up every day. Now, on the other side, there are so many models also coming up, right? You have to be aware of different models coming up on that side, and it's very relevant for you to kind of like know which model works best. You have to fit to your business on that. I tell you from experience, like when we started doing this, like which model to use, what to use, there are several factors playing into that the situation. One is, what is my use case? Not that every model has capabilities to serve the use case that you're looking for. So you have to experiment with different models. The next piece is like, you have to figure out like, there is a lot of talk about OpenAI, but there are several other models. Okay, OpenAI is really powerful, but at the same time, there are also other models, and your use case may be much smaller. Okay, you may not need that, like that large model to do. You may be able to do with smaller models. Okay, now that will play a critical role, because end of the day, two things you are looking at from a business perspective. One is acceleration and cost optimization. If your cost of running through AI becomes high, right, then you may not be like willing to try that in the large scale operation. So you will always have to kind of balance that fact. So you have to see what fits that thing. So it's a continuous process. What makes it more complex, like as you were talking about, like QTP, Windrunner, and those tools on that, it's a when you look at a enterprise level implementation, there's a lot of complexity built into it. One
Yes.
is the model part of it. Okay, and the model part, like I think the cloud vendors have made it easy these days that you can actually learn about this model, experiment with these models, like pretty much like in very easily. The second part which comes into the thing is, um, and if I talk about the Gen AI, not about the traditional AI, the Gen AI, the Gen AI is a large model, right? Okay, and it knows all about outside world, but it doesn't know your house. The moment it comes to your house, you have to give that context. You have to give all this information. How does your house looks like? Okay, so that whole mechanism has to be built out in a database and a lot of things. So there are a lot of components which need to be attached to that GenAI model to make it work and make it relevant for your uh, use case and the stuff. So those components also have their own version. You may use an open source version of a database, or you may use a supported version. So, and that's also evolving. So you have to also kind of like, learn that. Finally comes to that, there is another pieces of it, which is the deployment piece. How do you handle it? So the models usually run in the cloud. You don't run it mostly in the your local thing. So when you are working with the different clouds and they have their own flavor, how do you architect that the whole infrastructure? So there is learning in the process. Every component has their own flavor, own vendor, own open source, like and then proprietary. So you got to think about how do you keep learning this and put it all together for the solution that fits your need.
I think if I'm not wrong, and you guys can correct me in the comments. Again, I am at that point where in my head and in my mind, it's screaming at top of everything, and it's going like, "Sir, okay, how do I adopt? Let's switch to the topic of adoption, right? Because you've actually brought the conversation to that point where it's really important to understand about the adoption part. Do you want to switch gears to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Adoption. I think the first adoption thing is to talk about things, right? Okay, you got to talk about things into forums, right? Okay, then that is going to be creating that curiosity in you that hey, I need to learn about it. Okay, the adoption thing has to be broken down into multiple areas. Like the first is um, if you want to adapt in your own life, okay, like you want to learn about that, okay, then there are so many materials. Okay, not only testing, there is AI materials everywhere that you can actually learn. The important thing is you go through the fundamentals of it, then start using one of them. And once you start using it, you start interacting with that thing, and you will learn yourself that path or how the things work. Okay, so how I would say, like, we encourage people to learn is try, try and fail, and then try again, make it work, right? Okay, that's what you will learn that thing. So that's the one part of it, is the how the practitioners or the engineering world can actually learn about this. Okay, that's the first thing. Try out. The second part is the adoption in the industry. No matter whether you like know the thing, how it is getting used in the industry is very important, right? Again, a lot of companies have still not adopted Gen AI, right?
Right.
So as an organization, that discussion has to happen. There need to be a corporate level kind of strategy around how they're going to be adopting Gen AI, and they need to be actively working on it. Then individual line of business, let's say maybe the what we have seen most of the time, call centers, sales organizations have adopted AI, like
Right.
many of them, but testing is trying to figure out still. So even testing need to be ahead of the game, and they need to have that conversation with this, like their centralized, like body of their AI group, that how do I adapt AI into my organization? Okay, what is their policy? What is that stuff? So once you know that, then like you can facilitate the adoption within your in-house team, or you can adopt external tools, and that's what I think it will be helpful to kind of do. I think as podcasters, you guys are doing an awesome job. Like you are accelerating the adoption by talking about it in the industry. More you bring people who are talking about AI, that also helps to accelerate the adapters. I think this is something will always be there, like, the influencer group is always going to create that kind of like, that acceleration that we need to talk about AI, we need to learn AI, and we need to implement AI.
I genuinely didn't realize it would come to that end where you would say, but I mean, first of all, I never think of, and I don't want to be an influencer. No, I feel it. It's a very bad word. So I never want to be that.
Yeah.
Yes. And secondly, I'm actually glad that you find that whatever I am or other people are talking about is actually helping, the community at large, because once you're doing something, you don't look at it that way. Okay, how much impact it has already created and stuff like that. So thank you. And without taking into more of that own gaga of mine, I never realized that you would start the conversation with, about talking and having that awareness creation, like the first thing that would come into your answer. Like when I think of adoption, my two biggest concerns, and here I get a little skeptical, is, the need for my product, my project, or whatever my testing application is. There has to be a logical need, right? Because every time as a tester, the billing of a tester has to be justified, the number of people, everything has to be justified, right? So for me, need in the project of automation, what to automate and all of that matters like the supreme most for my for me or whoever I talk to or my clients and my previous work experiences. And the second one, which where I feel like how this would happen, where I go for a toss and you would find me getting a little negative towards this answer is, I have been an employee at banks, right? So while I see a good part with banking industry is like they are always on the forefront to try new things. But as soon as you think of AI, it becomes a little problematic because the security breaches, everything comes at a risk. Everything becomes very, very more questionable. I mean, I remember working at JP Morgan and I have tried blockchain or becoming T-shaped developer or agile or scrum like way back in 2015 where most companies weren't talking about it. And I was already doing those things like TDD, BDD, you name it. And I think that's how I have been, where I am in my career today, thanks to all that adoption very, very early on in their life cycle and in my experience, as a matter of fact. But when AI comes into picture, the banking industry goes a little, question mark. And it's, I won't doubt them, because again it comes to the security of all the bank holders, account holders, and everything. So that's one problem area where I feel like, okay, how it would happen.
I think, like, it's a good point you brought up. First of all, like, I see, like, podcast as a very positive sense, right? Because I think it spreads that whole, like, I can be knowing this information, I can willing to talk, but you need always forums where you can talk, and you guys provide that. So I really appreciate that thing. It's very interesting you brought up the banking industry, like, we talk to a lot of financial institutions like banking and insurance and other sectors. And I was curious to kind of know, like, how banking is looking at the Gen AI or the AI as a whole. Some of the data points I figured out is like, some of these banks actually started their journey 7, 8 years back. They started hiring people. They put a tremendous amount of like investment to work on this. So the numbers are around $1 trillion asset, like, investment expected over next couple of years going into this AI from the banking industry. Uh, and one of the banks, they had around 700 AI folks in their workforce. A pretty huge number if you think about it.
Need to
Now,
talk to these banks.
yeah, absolutely. So no matter whether you actually seeing that right on the face right now, but the work is going on behind the scene,
Right.
right? It's a race. It's a race that who brings out the best AI in the market.
Right.
And also, I see there is a collaboration also happening that they are trying to build out things, how they can, like open banking, right? So open banking was a collaborated effort, right? There is a lot of collaboration going on to see how the AI can help the banking industry. Now, banking is always a sector which is very sensitive. I really appreciate that they take that time to do the due diligence before they actually put it on the market. So I think that's a good part. But I see there's a lot of work coming in, and some of these institutions, when we talk to, they have literally thought it out how they want to bring it. They have put that roadmap in place. They have things, so it's going to come soon, okay, in some form or shape. But the work is there. There's an active work, and there is a lot of appetite to kind of use this in a very responsible way. That's what I see. That's a good thing. We can't take chances there, so it's a good thing.
No, absolutely. I think the entire banking industry was so responsive towards, the COVID situation also. Like all the video KYC that started happening, especially in India, finance and banking, all these sectors are so strongly built compared to any other country. If you would look at it, all the payment gateways that we have, everything is so smooth and so amazingly set up. And I'm so proud that this happens in India. But because like you rightly mentioned, banking is also one of the industry which is very receptive to changes. And like I was mentioning with my experiences, if they started blockchain way back in 2015, or if I was working on it at that time, definitely AI was also there in some team or other. And I used to feel they're investing in it, but yeah, you're probably right. There is something going to come in some shape or form.
Yeah,
Quite possible.
it's one of the biggest industry, right? If you look at it, it's the biggest industry, has a lot of investment power, and when they start adopting a technology, the technology itself actually evolve a lot,
Correct.
because people are thinking how to make it responsible, how to make it in AI. Ethics is one a big part, right? Okay, they make it compliance, ethics, and everything. They put that, and they actually and make this core technology much more kind of enhanced. So the bank adoption in banking and overall financial institution, I see this is going to be a huge kind of boost to all the AI.
I feel like this conversation is not going to end today, but this conversation is just going to start. And I hope you guys have questions around it. And if you do, please post it in the comments. That is how I'll get to know. And if there are further questions, do let us know, because that's how we can answer and help each other. Because I think in my effort, this conversation was, trying to break that silo of having questions around testing and AI. And I hope this is a good icebreaker for you also. Thank you.